After studying this module, you would know the meaning and concept of performance budgeting. You would understand the scope of performance budgeting. You would be able to identify the merits and demerits of performance budgeting, evaluate the difference between performance budgeting and performance program budgeting. So, first of all, let us understand the meaning and concept of performance budgeting. Performance budgeting is based on the concept of zero-based budgeting in earlier, which has been studied. Now, let us understand the meaning and nature of the concept of performance based budgeting in this module. Performance based budgeting is a process that involves evaluating the productivity of different operations within an organization and allocating a larger share of the available resources to the operations that are contributing the most to the overall well-being of the organization. This approach of allocation of resources is designed to encourage the judicious use of time, finances, and skills so that the entire organization is benefited. Performance-based budgeting is not a static approach and requires that the productivity of each operation be evaluated from one budget period to another. The foundation of any attempt at performance-based budgeting is identifying the results produced by each department, division, or sector of the organization. This often implies monitoring closely the ultimate objectives which any of the departments plans on to achieve by the end of the budget period, and also how the objectives relate to the goals of the entire organization. It is important to note that PBB does not tend to focus on individual activities which are necessary to initiate the strategies that lead to the achievement of the objectives. Instead, the focus is on the achievement of the targeted departmental goals. This approach allows the managers to frame the departmental strategies. By engaging in PBB, all sections or the areas of the organization have access to the resources they need. At the same time, this judicious allocation of resources prevents any possibility of time, talent, and money being allocated on an area that can operate or at optimum efficiency with a smaller budget. Some definitions. Let us now consider some of the definitions relating to PBB, which is as per its concept. The practice of developing budgets is based on the relationship between program funding levels and the expected results from that program. The performance-based budgeting process is a tool that the program administration can use to manage a more cost-efficient and effective budgeting outlay. Performance budget has been described as a budget that reflects the input of resources and the output of services for each unit of an organization. This type of a budget is commonly used by the government to show the link between the funds provided to the public and the outcomes of these services. According to Carter, performance budget uses a statement of missions, goals, objectives to explain why the money is being spent. It is a way to allocate resources to achieve the specific objectives based on the program goals and the measured results. The key to understanding PBB lies beneath the word results. So, it is results which are key. Harrison, on the other hand, has said that PBB sets a goal or is a set of goals to which monies are connected. That is, they are allocated. From these goals, specific objectives are delineated and funds are then subdivided amongst those goals. According to some of the comprehensive definitions, Siegel and Summers mention that performance budgeting comprises of three elements. A, the result, which means the final outcome. B, the strategy, which means different ways to achieve the final outcome. The activity or outputs, which include what is actually done to achieve the final outcomes. Siegel and Summers point out that within this framework, a connection exists between the rationales for specific activities and the end results, and the results are not excluded while the individual activities or outputs are. While this information is possible to understand which activities are cost effective in terms of achieving the desired result. As can be seen from some of the definitions used here, performance based budgeting is a way to allocate resources for achieving certain objectives. Now, the scope, the merits and demerits of performance budgeting are as follows. The models of performance budgeting. It is not just one model, there is not just one model for PBB, but a range of different models. The various models on PBB link the funding and the results, but they also do so in different ways. Some performance budgeting models such as program budgeting and zero-based budgeting are government-wide systems. On the other hand, there are some which are intended to apply to particular sectors of expenditure or categories of organizations. For instance, a formula funding model will normally apply to schools. A common tool used for this purpose is program budgeting, in which the expenditure is classified by the budget by objectives rather than solely by the economic categories such as salaries, supplies, communication costs and other organizational categories. The primary objective of program budgeting is to improve expenditure prioritization and the effectiveness and or the efficiency of the service which is delivered. To achieve these, they rely on three mechanisms, either in isolation or as a combination. The first of these mechanisms is linking budgets to performance targets. The second mechanism is used to creating a tighter link between funding and results in formula funding. The third mechanism used by the newer performance budgeting models is performance funding incentives to different departments. What are the advantages of PBB? There are several merits of PBB, such as transparency, quantitative analysis, setting budgeting priorities, organic integration of the process of planning and budgeting, improving public relations, and bringing financial and expected results aspects in sync. For this, there are certain there is a certain explanation that we need to go through. Transparency of performance budgets is one of the major advantages because taxpayers see results during every budgeting cycle when good programs get funding, whereas bad programs are dropped. Another advantage is that quantitative analysis and inputs from employees have a vested interest in their departments. Workers and program managers know what budgeting priorities are needed to further the goals of the agency when their performance is examined. It improves legislative review by presenting a comprehensive picture of various departments. This system ensures the advantages that are likely to accrue from an organic integration of the process of planning and budgeting. It helps to improve public relations by providing clearer information for a rational public appraisal of the responsibilities of the government. It helps in improving financial performance and the expected results which are missing in traditional planning and programming and the budgeting process are overcome with the help of PBB. Now let us look at the disadvantages of PBB. PBB is not devoid of limitations. It suffers from the certain disadvantages, like the focus is on quantitative rather than qualitative evaluation, and without decentralized accounting and systematic reporting, mechanism would be ineffective and inefficient. One major disadvantage of performance budgeting is that the relative cost between two divisions may not be comparable. Supplies, workload and office needs may differ from one department to the other, which makes larger budgets more challenging. Some departments heads may inflate or bloat their success to ensure better funding during the next budget cycle. Performance budgets are great for routine programs, but if emergency needs arise, then there may be difficulties in getting more funds. The program and activity classification developed are sometimes too broad to reveal the significant activities of the department and to serve as a basis for budgetary decision making and management. Due to its goal-oriented nature, PBB techniques focus on the quantitative rather than the qualitative evaluation. PBB without decentralization, accounting and systematic reporting mechanisms would be ineffective and inefficient. Despite its difficulties and limitations, PBB provides a meaningful basis for administrative planning, executive coordination, legislative scrutiny and administrative accountability. Most importantly, the progressive budget-based measures would strengthen the democratic process and evoke meaningful participation in the personnel in the implementation of the tasks set out under the budget. Obstacles and challenges to a successful PBB implementation can, however, be overcome by bringing about changes in the culture and the policies of the organization. Efforts should be made to include everyone to become a part of the entire process. Effort should be made for everyone to become a performance manager. The top level management must also define something called smart performance measures to enable the personnel to know what is expected of them. Finally, a successful PBB will require an enterprise-wide collaboration and commitment. Steps involved in PBB. The most important requirement for PBB is a program of action for any given year with specific indications regarding the tasks and costs of achieving them. Program formulation, allocation of resources, and budget execution are the core steps given which give effect to PBB. The first step is establishing a meaningful functional classification of public expenditure. Establishment, improvement, and extension of activity schedules for all the measurable activities. Establishment of work output, employee utilization, standard or unit costs by objective methods that bring in the system of accounting and financial management into accord with the classification. And finally, the creation of related cost and performance recording and reporting systems. Now let us look at the difference between program budgeting and performance budgeting. The name program budgeting is derived from the simple fact that the planning process is organized by programs rather than by departments or fiscal inputs or outputs. The program budgeting has passed through several distinct evolutionary periods. The first was the developmental period, which was born out of the need for a national budget. Accounting Act of 1921 was such that it was virtually impossible for any appropriating body or the public to know where its money was going. The budgeting practice of lumping expenditures has been consistent with the planned purpose of appropriation. Budgeting procedures basically consisted of revising estimates. The most significant change in the budgeting occurred in 1907 under the leadership of Frederick Cleveland, when the New York City Bureau of the Municipal Research adapted this method. Shortly thereafter, other cities followed the New York's initiative in budgeting. Currently, no standard definition of program budgeting exists. Program budgeting is generally described as a planning-oriented procedure. According to P6, the main objective of program budgeting is to rationalize policy making by two things: providing data on the costs and benefits of alternative ways of attaining the proposed public objectives, providing output measurements to facilitate the effective attainment of the chosen objectives. Program budgeting can be described as an approach and a process that relates resources to proposed and actual results. Program budgeting includes concepts, techniques, and structures. The overall structure of program budgeting consists of programs, sub-programs, and activities. In order to measure the results, the program budgeting requires outcomes which include measurable and specific outputs and performance indicators. It also refers to the output budgeting and is mainly used by the central and the state government in India. What are the unique features of program budgeting? 1. Profit orientation is missing. Objectives laid out and their achievement targets are not laid down in money terms. Targets are in physical units, and success is measured in terms of the overall achievement or underachievement of targets in comparison to the resources spent for achieving such targets. The advantages of program budgeting. Program budgets present more of useful information on service delivery and allow for transparency and accountability in service delivery. PBB is are more useful for determining whether allocations reflect priorities in planning and delivery of services. The PBB helps in monitoring the use of resources within each program, identifying areas where savings can be made or where more funds are needed. It helps in providing systematic and sound system of performance reporting, evaluation of each program. It encourages decision making at all levels of management in the organization. It facilitates introduction of the versatile tool of management by objectives. It leads to improvement of financial control. Now, what are the limitations of program budgeting? It fails to reflect the operation and execution of the process of the program. It has no relevance to the actual budget. It does not serve as an operating tool for managers. Evaluation of activities and operations of ongoing program is not focused, and the emphasis is on the new programs. Now, let us compare program budgeting and performance budgeting. Program budgeting, as developed by the US President Lyndon Johnson, was first introduced by the United States Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara in the Pentagon in the 60s. The budget system that describes and gives a detailed cost of every activity or program that is to be carried out in detail, along with their necessary resource cost, for example, raw material cost, staff and so on, is given in this method. The sum of all activities or programs constitutes the program budget. Thus, when looking at program budget, one can easily find out what precisely will be carried out, at what cost and with what expected results that are considered in detail. The system was taught at the John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University, but it evoked little interest except from the critics. Whereas performance budgeting is an adjusted budget prepared after the operations to compare the actual results with the cost that should have been incurred in the actual level of attainment. Now, a performance budget allocates money to various programs within an organization and also details the service level on which the budget is predicted. The service level is identified by the use of the performance measures, and in addition to the controlling costs, the primary orientation of the performance budget is that of improving the internal management of the program. The program budget allocates money to major program areas, focusing on the expected results of services and activities to be carried out. Program areas are often utilized by the government entities, including public safety, public works, human services, leisure services and general government. The emphasis of the program budgeting is on the attainment of long-term goals. Both the program and performance budgets use indicators to measure the financial and operational performance, but the budgets have different focuses. The performance budget emphasizes management efficiency, whereas the program budget emphasizes the benefits that the department gains from overall expenditures. Performance budgeting aims to simplify the budget formulation process. The performance budgeting service serves as a controlling tool for the financial operations and makes management more accountable for its actions. But the same is not the case with program budgeting. Now, let us summarize what we have studied. Performance-based budgeting is a process that involves evaluating the productivity of different operations within an organization and allocating a larger share of available resources to the operations that are contributing the most to the overall well-being of the organization. This is a comprehensive definition of performance-based budgeting. This is the approach of allocation of resources, and it is designed to encourage the judicious use of time, finances, and skills and so on, so that the entire organization benefits. Performance-based budgeting is not a static approach and requires the productivity of each operation be evaluated from one budget period to another. There is not just one model of performance-based budgeting. There are various models that link to funding and to results in different ways. Some performance budgeting models are related to other methods such as program budgeting and zero-based budgeting, and are government-wide systems which are in use. There are several merits of performance budgeting such as transparency, quantitative analysis, setting budget priorities, organic integration of the process of planning and budgeting, improving public relations, and bringing financial and expected results in sync with each other. PBB is not devoid of limitations. It suffers from certain disadvantages, like the focus is on quantitative rather than qualitative evaluation, and without decentralized accounting and systematic reporting, the mechanism it would be ineffective and inefficient. The program budgeting was developed by the US President Lyndon B. Johnson, and it was first introduced by the United States Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara in the Pentagon in 1960s. The program budgeting is an approach and a process that relates resources to proposed and actual results. Program budgeting includes the concept, techniques, and structure.